From the CISO Series, it's cybersecurity headlines.
T-Mobile data breach cost company $31.5 million. Deepfake scam hits U.S. senator, and public record systems riddled with security flaws. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have selected from this past week's cybersecurity headlines. Much like going to your local pinball parlor, you're looking for just the right machine. You stick that quarter in, and now we're ready to play. The metaphor got stretched there, and get some insight, opinion, and expertise from our guest, Jonathan Waldrop, the CISO over at the Weather Company. Jonathan, thank you for enjoying that tortured intro. Fantastic to have you here.
It was perfect, Rich. Thanks for having me.
Before we get in, how was your week in cybersecurity?
This week was fantastic. We kicked off Cybersecurity Awareness Month. It's pumpkin spice latte season, and fall weather is here. So we are loving it.
It is indeed fall, y'all. Thanks to our sponsor for today, SpyCloud, the new way to disrupt cybercrime. Join us on YouTube Live. We've already got a couple people over there. We've got to see CCL. I see Kevin Farrell. I see the big boss man, David Spark himself, getting involved in there. If you want to join and watch along live and comment with us, head over to CISOseries.com, look for the events drop down, and check out the cybersecurity headlines week in review. We'll be sure to highlight any of the comments that we get in chat as relevant, and it will be a good time. Before we jump into the news of the day, just a reminder that Jonathan's opinions expressed on this show are they're his opinions, not necessarily those of his employer. We've got about 20 minutes, though, so let's just get right into it. First up here, T-Mobile data breaches cost the company $31.5 million. In a settlement with the Federal Communications Commission, we know it as the good old FCC, T-Mobile has agreed to pay a total of $31.5 million following a series of data breaches over the last few years. The settlement includes $15.75 million in civil fines, and the other half of the money is to be spent on bolstering the company's cybersecurity measures, including adopting zero-trust architectures and multi-factor authentication. The breaches, which started in 2021, involve millions of current, former, and prospective customers, exposing details like social security numbers, driver's license numbers, and other personal information, a veritable kitten caboodle. So, Jonathan, when we hear a story about, the phone company being given a fine for lax behavior, we think, oh no, how will they ever possibly make this money back? Oh, I know, user fees. It seems that monetary fines aren't much of an incentive to improve practices, especially when that fine is just represented in actually investing in cybersecurity. Given the amount of data that's, things like including location data that telcos have on us, do you think they should be held to a higher standard here?
It's an interesting article, an interesting story here, because this is not new, right? We've had many breaches over the years. I was really interested to see how the FCC is saying, hey, you get to pay your fine, but then you also get to kind of reinvest in yourself. So that was really interesting kind of take there. We should absolutely hold ourselves to higher standards. If we've got sensitive data, we need to do what's the right thing to do, and not necessarily what's performative for a company, but we need to protect that, right? We've seen a lot of states over the past several years, California leading the way with CCPR and so forth. I think that's just going to continue to grow. There should be a higher standard. Few people want to push for more regulation, but I think we do need some level of, like, these are some of the basics, even if we have best practices, but we got to hold ourselves accountable to doing that. I will say, reading this, my first thought was, oh man, all of the salespeople that are reading that story thinking, hey, look, we've got some money to go chase over at T-Mobile.
We got new budget. Yeah.
Yeah. Here we go. Let's go. Let's get it.
All of you MFA vendors, zero trust vendors out there, start your engines.
Come on.
Well, yeah. Excuse me, I should have just said vendor. You're right. All right, next up here, one of the more interesting stories of the week: deepfake scam hits U.S. Senator. U.S. Senator Ben Cardin says he was a victim of an elaborate deepfake operation that impersonated a former Ukrainian foreign minister. The operation involved a fake Zoom call with what appeared to be a live audio-video connection. It seemed normal based on previous conversations the senator's office had had with that official. It wasn't until the imposter started asking specific questions, such as demanding an answer on the senator's stance on long-range missiles into Russian territory, that Cardin's staff ended the call, at which point staff confirmed the call was indeed fake. So I guess, just first off here, kudos to the senator and his team for recognizing the scam for what it was. In support of the story, Jonathan, you sent us over a press release from the National Cybersecurity Alliance regarding Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which outlines the standard cautions for things like MFA and reporting phishing attempts. We'll have it in our show notes for sure, so if you want to check that out. But what guidance can you offer about people identifying deepfakes? I mean, if it hit a senator, it can, extend to out into the enterprise, right?
Absolutely, and we've seen that happen. Deepfakes are a new form of social engineering, right? So social engineering attacks are certainly not new.
Mhm.
You get the hook in, and then you start the conversation. You build a little bit of trust and rapport, and then you actually kind of go for the jugular, if you will. Again, amazing that a staffer, presumably someone who's not in a cybersecurity background, caught this. So way to pay attention. Thanks for doing that. We all have a role to play there. Some of the lowest tech ways to identify this, or we saw this with grandmothers getting texted presumably by their grandkid, "Hey, I'm in jail, please don't tell mom or dad, but I need $500." There's ways around, "Hey, where do we have lunch the last time?" What's things like that. One of the other parts of this that was really interesting is I'm curious how the call got set up initially. Was it a calendar invite? Was it there's Zoom Gov, there's all sorts of government specific platforms and those offices that deal with certainly with foreign countries, with allies and so forth, right? We've got those kind of normal means of communication. So I'm kind of curious how it got started, but absolutely great job identifying it, flag it, and then shutting it down.
Yeah, I didn't even think further down the chain there if it wasn't just like a Gmail, calendar invite, Google Calendar invite. Probably went through a lot of steps. But yeah, when you think about it, it is kind of a natural extension of what we've seen for years now with email spoofing and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But and the same process, right? You're right, building trust, and then slowly, boiling the frog, for lack of a better term there. So yeah,
Yep.
good, definitely good stuff to keep in mind. Next up here, public record systems riddled with security flaws. Security researcher Jason Parker disclosed dozens of critical vulnerabilities found across 19 commercial platforms for U.S. public records used by courts, government agencies, and law enforcement. Some we've already covered on the show, like the Georgia voter registration database with a voter cancellation vulnerability. I believe that got the very prestigious eye roll for that episode, if I do recall. Other systems allowed attackers to do things like elevate user status to administrators, reset passwords, or access admin dashboards, and then the game's kind of all over. Many required no advanced access. This was probably the most concerning part of this, just being done by someone registering an account and kind of knowing what buttons to press in that process. All disclosed issues have been fixed that were reported in this story, and there's no signs of active exploitation that we know of. But Jonathan, I'm curious, is that a satisfactory conclusion to this story, or do you have to wonder whether the thieves may have come and gone already, maybe still lurking? I know that's a long-term play for a lot of advanced threat actors. And how did these vulnerabilities come about in the first place, I think is the other broader question I'd want to see answered, down the road.
Yeah, I mean, to answer the first question, you said it initially, that we know of is the caveat here, right? We don't have any indicator of compromise at this point, right? So that's really where security is a journey for sure. There's no endpoint to it, and it's particularly concerning that this is things like public records, things that when you joke about your permanent record when you're in grade school, but like no kidding, these are permanent records. There's a lot of concern there for sure. Absolutely good that we've done some investigating and hey, we don't think some threat hunts hopefully, and we don't think there's anything bad here, but we've got to stay vigilant. How do we prevent these? I mean, there's all kinds of discussions on how do you prevent vulnerabilities. There's we can have a whole podcast about that. And in fact, you have one.
Yeah. Well, and it was funny when the Georgia story came up. I mean, a lot of it was like, I mean, did they not even like try to just red team just the onboarding process for someone creating an account and stuff like that? And clearly
threat modeling is a real thing, right?
Yeah. And clearly that was not just an issue. I think a lot of the speculation was, oh, well, Georgia didn't want this, potentially didn't want, there was political motivations for not to want this portal to be that good anyway. So, but clearly this is a much wider issue than just one system.
For sure. And nobody's thinking about the election that's coming up in 31 days, right? That's so far away.
Is that still happening? Okay.
I've heard that's a thing. Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure.
Weird. Yeah. So yeah, we will keep following up with coverage on that because I think that is something I want to see some follow up on. If we get more details about, kind of the origin of some of these, we will definitely follow up on the show. Before we move on to our next story, I want to spend a few moments with our sponsor for today, SpyCloud. SpyCloud disrupts cybercrime by telling you what criminals know about your business so you can take action on exposed identity data to prevent cyber attacks like ransomware. To learn more about how to level the playing field against bad actors and combat cyber attacks, visit spycloud.com/headlines. That's spycloud.com/headlines. Next up here, Rackspace Breach sparks vendor blame game. When an investigation was launched into the attack or the hacking incident at Rackspace on September 24th, it was initially attributed to a zero-day flaw in ScienceLogic's SL1 monitoring app. Then, ScienceLogic shifted the blame to an undocumented vulnerability in a different bundled third-party utility. While ScienceLogic declined to identify the responsible third party, they rapidly developed a patch to remediate the incident and have made it available to all customers globally. Attackers were able to pivot from the monitoring software to other internal Rackspace servers to compromise sensitive data of users who've now received breach notifications, leaked things like IP addresses, some like access tokens, and I believe some hashed passwords as well. Jonathan, though, almost every show there is a story where I have to look over my metaphorical glasses in a school marmy style. And in this case, all I can say is, say what? I'm curious, what's your take on this?
Yeah, the blame game is never a good approach to incident response and your public, your public presentation, if you will, after in the immediate aftermath. Um, can't blame anybody for a 0 day. We've all been impacted by them, right? But it's all in how you respond and how you react to it and how you plan for these types of events. We've got to build resiliency into our third party systems. We need to know where they're at. We need to know what access they have. But again, kudos to Science Logic for identifying it, patching it. Sounds like pretty quickly, and then not joining in part of the blame game there.
Yeah, the only thing, I mean, it is important for a company like Rackspace to disclose when there is a 0 day because they
Oh
are a
yeah,
vendor that's impacting other people. We want to shine a light on that so that can get patched as quickly as possible. But yeah, to kind of, I don't know, yeah, start that discussion of, oh, well, I, I don't think, I think we need to move beyond that, the idea that, oh, we have to have zero tolerance for this kind of stuff. These issues are going to happen, and it's more about the speed of remediation, the transparency in which you do so, that I think really
absolutely.
builds trust with people going forward.
Yeah, resiliency is the bottom line there. I think.
Absolutely. All right, next up here, FCC offering $200 million to protect schools and from hackers. The Federal Communications Commission is offering up $200 million through the Schools and Libraries Cybersecurity Pilot Program. K through 12 schools and libraries will be able to reimburse things like advanced firewalls, identity protection and authentication services, malware protection, and VPNs. The FCC says it expects to open the application process this fall and will select a mix of schools with added emphasis on funding projects in low income and tribal applicants. The pilot program will be used to evaluate whether to fund this kind of program on a more permanent basis. Jonathan, this is an interesting initiative, both in terms of focus on technologies as well as being something of a trial balloon, especially given the fact that libraries are primary targets of ransomware gangs, and certainly kind of education in general is seen as very vulnerable to this. What are
Right.
your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know if this was timed with Cybersecurity Awareness Month, but man, it's a great time to have an initiative like this. Schools and libraries certainly provide such resources to the communities that they serve. We've got to do a good job at protecting them and protecting our kids. I hope some of the funding is allocated to some outreach programs, to some classes. Hey, how can you help protect your kids, your seniors, some of the vulnerable populations there. Really, I hope this is really, really successful and it can continue to grow and expand beyond a trial process here.
Yeah, Michael Vinding has a really great comment and a question in our chat here. Do they get guidance on how best to go about using these funds, or are they on their own navigating the cyber vendor landscape? Yeah, I do wonder about that, and I also wonder. We've kind of run across this problem, especially when we're talking about smaller school districts, where they might not necessarily have the same buying powers as enterprise. This is why you see a lot of them, grouping together, do that kind of stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of issues there where whether it's guidance from the government or whether that's them just opening doors to things like mass enterprise licensing would also be a big role on top of Jonathan what you were saying, kind of raising that cyber hygiene level kind of on a user basis as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And David Cross, you can detect when I'm doing or I'm sharing deepfake news. I'm going to have a canary page up. So if that ever goes down, you'll know I'm doing deepfake news. Just so everybody knows, CISOseries.com/Rich Canary. You can find it there. Don't go there. That URL doesn't exist. All right. Our next story here, one that's always close to my heart. I love two things. I love weird hack, like Ben Gurion University air gap defeating stories, and I love talking about quantum computing. So NordVPN begins post-quantum support rollout. The popular VPN provider joined the smattering of companies getting ready for the advent of quantum computing. NordVPN rolled out upgraded protocols that comply with the new NIST standards for post quantum encryption. Now, this isn't a full rollout. Just everybody calm down. I had to calm down myself reading the story. The post quantum encryption is only available on its Linux client, and the company said it will use the data from that rollout as a stepping stone to a brighter transition. But they threw in some corporate speak because they say they will strive to bring it to all of its applications. Not exactly the firmest commitment from Nord. They said the feature is going to come, or it came in response to an uptick in harvest now, decrypt later attacks, even if practical quantum computing isn't on the horizon yet. So, Jonathan, this was our producer Steve's favorite story of the week as well. And whenever everything piques his interest, that gets me excited as well. In contrast to AI mania, here we see a VPN provider picking up on a genuine threat, harvest now, decrypt later, and building a better defense before the problem officially is on our doorstep. I'm curious, what's your take on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really cool to think about what's in the future. We're technologists. I mean, that's why we're in this business, right? It's always changing. There's always something new and interesting to go check out. Um, you know, super cool to see people leaning into the threats that are emerging and potentially emerging later on down the road. But man, as referenced by all the other articles today, we've got a lot of work to do with computers now that exist today. So really cool. And I hope there's lots of smart researchers that are, universities and research centers around the world that are thinking about these kind of problems. From a practical standpoint, for me, it's like that's cool. I got to go patch some systems. I'll be right back, y'all.
Yeah, what I'm encouraged with this rollout initially is I'm thinking of the other providers, very privacy focused companies that have started
Yeah,
to do this. VPN provider, obviously Apple rolling this out with iMessage, Signal doing it as well, and it's like if this becomes a non-consideration, right? If this is just becomes the standard for encryption going forward. I feel like that's a net win for like on a consumer basis. Obviously, enterprises and security teams all need to fight that battle on their own. I'm just thinking from a consumer perspective of we can enjoy the benefits of this, and all I had to do was install a software update or install server side anyway, so it's it's
yeah.
going to be all handled, which is kind of nice.
For once, we're not playing catch up with security. We're actually maybe a little bit ahead, even. So that's super. That's amazing.
Although the proviso for all of this is that NIST is very quick to say this is the first draft that we're doing of this. Like we feel good. What we know about quantum computing now, considering it's still a science experiment that needs to be hyper cooled and is not practical in any way,
Yeah.
that these work now, let alone in 20 years when we're using it for all sorts of stuff. Maybe I don't know if 20 years is even practical, but
But when it comes, we're gonna be ready.
yeah. Well, we have
We're,
a plan to be
we're
ready and adapt these protocols.
there. You go.
So
There you go.
all right. Before we get out of here, I wanted to just thank everybody that was commenting in our chat. We had a cat giving us a nice wave there. I do appreciate that. A cat. I always like a nice hand wave there. Michael Vinding, David Spark, recommending, by the way, for just it's good practice for families. Do a password or something like that to detect deepfakes. I think this is great policy. I know for years I always thought my brother was crazy, but like if I just sent him like an unsolicited link, he'd be like proof of life, and I'd have to tell him like an inside joke that only we knew to each other. And now
That's
I'm like,
perfect. That's perfect.
I'm like Nick, I deeply apologize. You were just you you were just ahead of the deepfake curve. So good advice by all, definitely there. Before we get out for Jonathan, was there any story that was a thumbs up or an eye roller for you today?
The theme for Cybersecurity Awareness Month is secure the world, and we've got things from government employees and concerns there to public record systems, schools and libraries. Man, the message for me is all those stories get a big, huge thumbs up where we're talking about protecting the world around us. There was another story this week about Kia cars being vulnerable, right? So there literally it covers every part of our lives, and you don't have to be a cybersecurity professional to take action and help yourself and your family be more secure. So all of those around us get a big thumbs up. Keep it up.
I know we're in October. No one wants to think about the holidays right now. I will stand by this. A subscription to a password manager is an amazing Christmas gift. Get that
Perfect.
for all of your family. Please do that, or set them up with Apple or whatever, however you want to do it. Give them a
Something.
password
Anything.
manager for Christmas.
There
I
you
think
go.
that's up.
Love it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan Waldrop, the CISO over at the Weather Company, just bringing the great takes, bringing the great perspective to the news. That's what always gets me excited for the show each and every week. Thank you so much for your time. I had a blast.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks also to our sponsor for today, SpyCloud, the new way to disrupt cybercrime. And thanks to our audience today. We can't always get every single comment up on the screen, but we deeply, truly from the bottom of my heart, appreciate you being here, making the show better. Michael Vinding, that comment was amazing. I want to see what the follow-up on this. I want to dig into the policy and figure out, is this going to be throw money at stuff, or are people going to be, kind of help guiding the distribution of this stuff? Really great stuff. And thank you so much. Make sure you join us next Friday at 3:30 Eastern for another episode of The Week in Review, giving you that context for the cybersecurity headlines. And in the meantime, you can still get that daily news fix through cybersecurity headlines every single day. Give us about 6 minutes. We'll get you all caught up. Until the next time we meet, I'm Rich Stroffolino, reminding you to have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOSeries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.